Okay, well, today we're going to take a look at Rick and Morty and what we can learn from a particular episode that talks about the emergence of a religion slash cult in the wake of a otherwise indecipherable disaster. So today we're going to get swifty. Hello and welcome to today's episode of Talk on Things and Stuff. It is, Thursday, January 21st, the day after the changing of the guard in the White House. We are now under the boot of Biden as president rather than the boot of Trump as president. So we'll see what this new era brings. But in the wake of that, there's been a lot of discuss about the cult of Trump and QAnon and how is it that people who seem to have as much devotion to a political figure as people in a religion would have devotion to a religious figure. How could this happen? What could this be? That's not really something we're going to get into. At this point, I'm not really getting political on this channel other than to acknowledge that the things that we talk about in terms of how somebody may become kind of saturated with dogma and ideology, which affects how they see themselves and the world around them, how that can exist both in religious paradigms as well as in political paradigms. So there was an episode of the irreverent cartoon Rick and Morty, which kind of spoke to this a little bit. And I thought it would be fun to go through that episode and just take some selected scenes from it and kind of see if there's anything that we can learn about how groups may be appeal to certain vulnerabilities that we as humans have in the face of uncertainty and the unknown, and how a religious paradigm or any other type of ideological paradigm could pop up and answer those things and kind of change how we see ourselves. So it is the episode that is most famous for the song Get Swifty, but we're going to we've filtered out a little bit of the extra goings on, and we're focusing primarily on what is going on the other side of the earth, other than where the president and Rick and Morty are dealing with the aliens, but we'll get into that in a little bit. As usual, if you are interested in becoming alerted when new videos pop up, then click the subscribe button and click the little bell so that you get all the notifications. And with that being said, if at any point during this stream there are any issues with audio quality, feel free to enter that in the comments. That's the only way that I really get that kind of feedback. So without further ado, let's begin. All right. There we go, and we're going to start out with the setup.
Hey, golf is easy now.
Ah! Golf is hard again! Golf is hard again!
The view from here is the same as yours, Jim. A giant head has entered Earth's gravity, triggering climate change and natural disasters we thought were impossible for at least another 8 years.
Let's not make this political, Terry. Do we know what this giant head wants?
Show me what you got!
Jim, you heard the said, show me what you got.
Show me what you got! I want to see what you got!
Oh boy, time to go, Morty.
Where?
The Pentagon.
All right, so that's the big setup, and you can see, if you're not familiar with Rick and Morty, it's kind of like, what if Doc and Marty from Back to the Future, what if we went on a whole bunch of adventures with them, and the Doc character is a little bit more off his rocker in the Rick and Morty cartoon, and it just kind of explores a bunch of different science fiction tropes. But along the way, they engage in some pretty thought-provoking commentary by way of satire and parody. And this episode is one that is really good for this. So it starts out, and these huge planet-sized heads zoom into Earth's orbit, and they immediately change the magnetic fields and the gravitational pull of what's going on Earth. They cause widespread havoc, like Armageddon type stuff. And most of the people on Earth are seeing this as just something completely unknown. They have no idea what's going on. It seems almost like the end of the world. Whereas Rick and Morty, Rick being kind of a person who already is aware of the wider interdimensional, interplanetary beings that are out there, kind of knows what's going on, so he's going to go talk to the president. So that's the main setup, and let's keep going from here.
Is it God? If it's God, do we get out of school?
It's not God, Summer.
She's allowed to think it's God if she wants, honey.
Shut up, Jerry.
Okay.
Dad, what do you know about this?
Morty and I are going to look into it. You guys hold tight.
Scary stuff, huh? Pretty freaky. Hi, I'm Morty's math teacher. I'm also part of the street team inviting folks to the church downtown so we can pray together.
How is praying going to help?
Ma'am, a giant head in the sky is controlling the weather. Did you want to play checkers? Let's be rational. I'll see you at God's house.
Okay, so we've been introduced here to some of the characters from the Rick and Morty universe. Specifically, you have the two parents and the teenage daughter. I guess you can see the mouse there. The two parents and the teenage daughter. Rick is the father of the mother figure in the family, and Jerry is the father. The mother's usually considered very competent and intelligent. The father is a bumbling idiot. And the teenage daughter is a typical teenage daughter. She's interested in boys. She doesn't really respect her parents all that much. She's kind of making her own way. She doesn't really give a flip about much else other than normal, typical teenage girl stuff. And so it's important to understand what her normal character is like, because it's really what happens to her in the context of the social forces that we're going to see evolve, where you can see that there's something different going on with the teenage daughter. And that's kind of the journey of the teenage daughter in all of this is one of the most important parts to pay attention to. So you can see there's chaos in the community. Rick and Morty have gone off in a spaceship to try to reach the president. And now everybody else who has no idea what's going on, they don't even know the existence of aliens or anything like that, they're confronted with the great unknown, and they're turning to those institutions which currently exist to try to deal with questions of the unknown, specifically the community church. And the mother figure there, you can see, is kind of a very nuts and bolts science. She is an atheist and does not really believe in God. And so when the people say we're going to go to the church and pray to try to deal with all of this, she's like, well, what's the good of prayer? How's prayer going to answer this? So you're seeing already the different personalities here. So let's keep going.
The rest of the world you must listen to me right now.
Gentlemen, one at a time. Simon?
SETI, NORAD, and every broadcaster on the planet are attempting to show this being what humanity's got. String theory, world history, the human genome.
Have you tried sending in launch codes? Mr. President. What America's got is 70,000 megatons of kaboom boom. Hold it, don't move!
Stand down. I'm the leader of these people, and I'm unarmed.
My name is Rick Sanchez. This here's my grandson, Morty.
Hi, Morty.
Hey! I've seen enough of the galaxy to know what we've got here is a cromulon from the Cygnus 5 expanse. So you can forget about nukes, and you can forget about math. This head won't go away until Earth shows them it's got a hit song.
People, everyone!
Okay, so we're going to follow two different storylines for a lot of this. One of the storylines is Rick and Morty, where they're dealing with the president. Rick is somebody who knows what this is. These heads go and they confront planets and they say, "Show me what you got." And there's basically a interdimensional, intergalactic reality television show where they find planets and say, "Show us your best pop music, and if you win, then you'll survive. But if you lose, the planet will get destroyed or disintegrated." And so those are the people who actually know what is going on in the context of this fictional universe. Now, back in the community, in the neighborhood where Rick's family lives, are people who have no idea what the context of all of the great calamities are. And so we're going to follow them as they try to make sense and find meaning in these calamities. And that's where the real lessons of this particular episode come into play. So let's keep going.
Remain calm. Every crisis of faith is an opportunity for more faith. When God deals you an 11, you don't fold, you double down, and always hit on a soft 16. That means you, Jews.
I beg your pardon, Pastor, but the last I looked outside, it seems to be you that's been dealt the weak hand.
Jews rule!
Nobody? Okay, tough church.
Hi, I'm just gonna come out and make this pitch. The old gods are dead. All hail the one true God, the giant head in the sky.
They're all children of God.
Bob, I get it. But unless this can beat that, what have you done for me lately? So if you'll all excuse me, I'm going out onto the sidewalk, I'm dropping to my knees and pledging my eternal soul to the thing that literally controls the weather. Out of my way.
Okay, if sanity's been restored to this assembly, I'd like to talk about the cost of repairing our new organ. Sally, the plate, please.
Oh, this is my favorite part.
Giant head in the sky, please.
Okay, so we can see that all of the old norms are breaking down. You've got the one guy who's the principal of the school. His name, oddly enough, is Vagina, but he tries to tell people that is his real name, but it's from some Swedish origin or something like that. So don't be distracted by that. But he's like, your God, your particular religion is not really answering this problem, so I'm going to go out and pray to the actual head in the sky, and it's a floating head, so they can kind of relate to it a little bit from an anthropomorphic perspective. But I don't know that there's much to that aspect of the metaphor other than examining what sort of things may cause you to switch religious ideologies. But what happens when he sees the effect of his prayer and how the community receives that will be interesting. So let's keep going.
Please forgive all that we've done. We're sorry for our increased levels of emissions and our racism, and of course the Amber Alerts I keep ignoring on my phone.
Morty, let's do it. Why don't you find a button on one of those keyboards and lay down some kind of beat? Oh man, okay.
So we have the guy who said the prayer, and they're looking to see if anything's happened. Now, meanwhile, in the other storyline where we know what's actually going on, Rick has told them they have to give them a really good pop song, and then hopefully the heads will be happy and they'll go away, or we'll see what happens. But that's actually when they say, show me what you got, that's what they're actually asking for. So this is the pop song.
Okay, all right, Oh, yeah. You gotta get swifty. You gotta get swifty in here. It's time to get swifty.
Get swifty? What the hell is that?
It's our world's best effort, that's what.
Time to get swifty in here. I'm Mr. Bulldog.
Mr. Bulldogs?
Don't analyze it, Nathan, it's working.
Time to get swifty in here.
And third-level donors get our all-access family pass.
Listen, the storm is stopping.
It's swifty time today.
Please be kind to us, for we are but tiny things with entire bodies stuck to your ground.
I like what you got. Good job.
Yeah!
What do you know? He was right.
Now hold on a second. Let's be rational about this. No, I'm just saying we don't know there's a cause-effect relationship. Oh my God.
Okay, so to explain kind of what's gone on here, back with Rick and Morty, where they're actually interacting with reality in the context of this cartoon, they've performed the song and it was given approval by the head. And so the head left, but it left in the time of frame right after Principal Vagina uttered a prayer in supplication to the floating heads. And so he thought that his prayer was the thing that was accepted by the floating heads, and the heads left. And then the community, again, in the neighborhood, they have no idea about the reality show or anything like that. they believe that that's actually what's happened. So now they have the evidence before them that this prayer has changed this, cataclysmic event into something that's more survivable. The earthquake stopped, the oceans receded, and it was that prayer that did it. Now, the mom in this situation, she says, hold on, we've got to be rational. We don't know that there's a causative correlation between what's happened or whether it was just a coincidence. And the community pauses for a little bit, but doesn't really make much of a difference there because the evidence is right before them in front of their eyes. And what we're about to see is that was just the audition. And so as soon as the guy said, I like what you got, well, now they're going to teleport the Earth to the actual game show. And but again, even that is going to be misunderstood and misrepresented. So let's see what we got. We'll back it up just a hair there.
We don't know there's a cause-effect relationship. Oh my God.
What's going on now?
What the hell happened?
Mr. President, you're gonna want to see this.
I think planet Earth has just been transported.
The head has left and sent its children.
Holy crap! Oh dear, Giant Head. We apologize for that discussion. It will never happen again. Oh dear, Giant Head.
Sir,
Okay, so we can see that even the people who were skeptics at first, they see that something real and tangible has happened right after the guy uttered the prayer. The big head went away, and from their perspective, they don't know that the Earth has been teleported. They just see that suddenly there are a multitude of heads in the sky, and they interpret it as, well, it's been accepted. And so now even the skeptics, you can see even the woman who's like, hold on, let's be rational. She's on her knees and praying because it's like the evidence is right there. And so all of this is kind of speaking in the paradigm of Rick and Morty to how what you're going to see as a cult is set up. But what I want to make sure that we pay attention to in this discussion is not so much the nuts and bolts about how this particular cultish group is set up, but what it does to the people who start to adhere to its ideology, its ritual, its practices, how it changes what they would consider to be normal behavior and violate what would otherwise be their moral norms. Because that's really what I see as the big lesson here. So let's keep going.
Oh dear, Giant Head.
Sir, he started picking up on a garbled signal. We're decrypting it now.
We asked them to show us what they got, and they did. Now we'll see which of them has got the most. 24 hours, 5 planets, 5 songs. But in the end, there can only be one planet music. All participation is involuntary. Disqualified and losing planets are disintegrated by plasma ray.
It's probably a bad time to mention it, but any astronauts you guys had in orbit are definitely dead.
Hello? Yes, sir, yeah. Thank you, sir, thank you. He says he's proud of what we're doing and hopes we have a great Ascension Festival.
Okay, so now we fast forwarded a little bit, and this is kind of where you get some of the really important aspects of what is being conveyed here. So you can see that Principal Vagina, who's the one who uttered the prayer that somehow affected God, has taken upon himself a mantle of religious authority. They've fashioned hats after the manner of what they believe their God to be. And he's got a staff with a satellite dish that is hooked up to earphones that he then plugs into his ears, and he holds conversation with gods in the sky. He tells them, he tells the gods things, the gods tell him things, and then he conveys what the gods are saying to the people in the community. Now, it should be no surprise that you can see a very direct metaphor here with prophetic religious paradigms. So, if you think of like David Koresh or any like religious figure who claims prophetic status to be able to have communication with God, and so its followers, they don't have to hear God's voice themselves, they can hear the prophet's voice. And so you can hear the guy go, oh yeah, God, that's what you want? Okay, and then he takes the earphones out and says, God says this. Now, keep in mind that this man was put in this position by a sort of, a chance, just an occasion where his prayer was coincided with things that were happening on the other side of the planet. And then he took that authority now, and he's now able to create a religious culture in his community centered around this new religious paradigm. And you're going to start to see that there's a lot of activities that are actually essential parts of any human community, where they come together around celebrations, where they find meaning in the tasks that provide food and sustenance and community, and they give each individual person in the group a sense of purpose. Now, again, all of this is from a complete coincidence and, frankly, a lie that is generated by this religious leader, but it is the tool that the bricks of those lies built up a culture that actually does bring meaning and purpose to the individuals. And we're going to see if that is a good thing or a bad thing. Let's keep going.
Happy Ascension!
Happy Ascension!
We should pack up and leave town now.
I think it's inspiring that our community is coping with fear in a way that involves a festival and homemade ice cream. If you'd stop being such an evangelical atheist, you might start enjoying yourself. Whoa, look at you! You're wearing the hat and everything.
Here's yours. Mom, do you mind if I cook dinner tonight?
Yeah, sure. Wait, what?
I love you guys. You gave me life. And it's the will of the many heads that all children honor their parents.
Dinner sounds nice.
Pardon, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Summer, are you coming to the Ascension?
Father, can we please go to the Ascension?
Sure, let's go to the Ascension. What is it?
We hereby send these on.
All right, so it's important to see kind of what's gone on in this particular conversation. So I think it's worth talking about vulnerability, because all of these groups that try to latch on to new members and bring new members in there understand the power of vulnerability for their message to be received. And that vulnerability can be in times of stress and times of fear and uncertainty. In Mormonism, if you Google on the Thoughts on Things and Stuff channel, there's a video called Targeting the Vulnerable, where there's a clip from an official missionary training video where Elder L. Whitney Clayton actually instructs the missionaries on how to identify and target people who have had major shifts in their life, whether it's the birth of a child, a divorce, the death of a loved one, huge traumatic events that would then make them receptive to the message of the gospel. But that same receptivity is just another way of saying making them vulnerable to adopting a new ideology, a new religious framework that could then have an effect in their life. And that vulnerability, part of it is because we're unstable, we're unsure, we've got a degree of spiritual sensitivity and tenderness that is looking for a degree of healing. It's looking for comfort. And so when you have a group that comes in, answers questions that resolve uncertainty about death and life in the hereafter, and supplies love bombing and instant community that instantly gets their hooks into you by making you feel loved and accepted, not as an authentic expression because it's tied to your willingness to enter into the group. They're not really interested in who you are and what your values and priorities are if they don't include joining the group and doing the things that the group prescribes. And so it may seem authentic. They may seem like really good and loving people. And if you just go along with it, you're never really going to know that it's anything different from that. It's only when you choose not to go along with it or decide that your own values and priorities do not align with the group, and so you're not going to agree with what they agree, then you'll see whether or not it's actual authentic love and expression. But if you never press against those walls, you're simply going to find people who are extending to you the very things that you are in need of at your moment of tragedy. Now, in the context of this cartoon, it's because there's all of the fear and the uncertainty with these huge heads and the storms and, earthquakes and people dying. That's, it's like the Armageddon scenario. And of course, it's going to cause fear. And you can see how quickly everybody went to their knees and started praying because they suddenly found something that offered them some sense of hope, salvation, and survivability. And in particular, you'll find that religious groups target college-age kids. Now, these are kids who have just left their parents' home. They, in this process of human psychological development, chances are they have not really solidified on what their own values and principles are. And so they're malleable and they're vulnerable to new ideologies that can come in and get their hooks into them and get them to conform with their own ideology, whether it's religious or political or otherwise. And so I don't know if it was by accident, but the fact that they got the older teenage girl to be the one who was really, really invigorated and really captured by this new headism, is what we're going to learn that it's called, is very insightful, because that is exactly the vulnerable population here. You can see the parents are a little bit skeptical about it. The father kind of is like, well, it's community, it's good. We've come together in the face of fear. And we're going to see if he maintains that perspective. But let's keep going.
We should pack up and leave town now.
I think it's inspiring that our community is coping with fear in a way that involves a festival and homemade ice cream. If you'd stop being such an evangelical atheist, you might start enjoying yourself. Whoa, look at you!
Okay, so in particular now, we know that the daughter, if you've been watching the series, she's full of sarcasm, not any respect for her parents, a little bit of animosity towards her mom, and this is very different, though. She's now wearing the hat and giving the hat to others, so her identity now is wrapped up in this new organization. It's given her meaning, it's given her purpose, and it's given her a moral, kind of a moral framework in which to view herself in the world. She knows that she's good, she's doing the right things if she conforms to the ritual of the group, and we're going to see eventually how that almost works to her detriment. But for now, we're seeing a lot of the positive elements of it, as the parents are just amazed by this positive, respectful version of their daughter that the group seems to have inculcated. And you'll see, if you listen to how people talk about Mormons, they'll say they're just happy, they're polite, they're fun. There's a lot of positive things that whatever it is, the culture of the group seems to give. And it's not specific to Mormonism. If you have HBO Max, there's a documentary about this group called NXIVM. The documentary is called The Vow, and it's a group formed by this very charismatic guy, Keith Raniere. And it's centered around self-improvement. And people, when you watch the documentary, you can see even the critics who are out of it and see it as something that's very coercive and harmful, see that there were very positive things that were done. And in some cases, they felt the most empowered and the most, depth of their own conception of themselves in the haze of the group ideology and the framework that it has there. There's some really powerful things at play, but it's because in all of these contexts, those positive elements are married to the dark side of the ideologies that lead to self-loathing, self-hatred, lead to prejudicial judgment of people outside of the group, who lead to all sorts of distortions of our reality and our relationships. It's that flip side that really does these things disservice. But for now, the parents are having their first encounter with what seems to be a completely different version of their daughter.
You're wearing the hat and everything.
Here's yours. Mom, do you mind if I cook dinner tonight?
Yeah, sure. Wait, what?
I love you guys. You gave me life. And it's the will of the many heads that all children honor their parents.
Dinner sounds nice.
Pardon, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Summer, are you coming to the Ascension?
Father, can we please go to the Ascension?
Sure, let's go to the Ascension. What is it?
We hereby send these unwantables skyward, that they might be inhaled by the many heads, later to be sneezed back to us as better babies. Headward, free now to rise.
Okay, so now we're seeing a little bit of that dark side that I had. So invariably in all of these groups that employ coercive, undue influence, call them cults, call them high demand ideologies, whether it's political or religious, when you have people who don't conform to the demands and expectations of the group and its ideology, well, then something's got to be done with that, because all of these groups put forth the idea that theirs is the best way. And so when people have any divergence from their way, from their path, then you've got to cast them out. You've got to find some way to separate yourselves from these unclean or impure influences. And in the context of headism here, we can see that they've labeled a thief, goth, and a movie talker, all undesirable things. And what they're doing is they've tied balloons onto them, and they're going to float up and be swallowed by the head and reborn as babies. Now, the parable here, though, is that it doesn't have to be something as banal sounding as having them float up with balloons. That's ridiculous. But essentially what they're doing is they're killing them. And metaphorically, that's what this serves, is that they're killing them for their own good because they're going to be reborn again through the head as babies, and the babies will be able to be raised in the ideology and in the group, and so they won't be subject to the wrong think, which is what they're being punished for. Now, before this headism, before all this happened, people in the community would never think of identifying these wrong thinkers and doing these things, casting them out, killing them, canceling them. But because these people don't conform to their ideology, now this is the right thing to do. And so it's a way of morally subverting your framework of what you think is good and bad in the world, because you've allowed in this case, religious ideology to come in and draw a line between who is good and who is bad and prescribe you to do things to purge that which is bad. And that has a way of changing a person, because you've got to silence any humanity in yourself that would otherwise push back against this. But the ideology is what actually gives you the answers to let you see your actions that previously you would see as bad instead as good. And we see that in play here.
Headward, free now to rise. Headward, free now to rise.
Oh, yes! Yes, rise to the giant head! You are free to be free! And then...
Okay, so that moment right there where you can see that the daughter, who is completely indoctrinated, is celebrating this killing of members of their community because they have wrongthink or they don't do the right thing. And the parents, who themselves are not completely bought into the ideology, are looking on with horror. And even Jerry, who's holding an ice cream cone, who was celebrating the fact that the community's coming together with ice cream cones, sees that there's a dark side to what is going on in their community. Because, we've seen where groupthink and dogma and ideology all solidify with the psychological forces of large groups of human creatures, and they can produce moral atrocities. If you go back and look through the annals of history, whether it is the Crusades, the Inquisition on the religious side versus the communist revolutions in Russia or China on the political side, or whether it's any other form of atrocity that has been justified and informed by some sort of dogmatic ideology that subverts otherwise normal human moral impulses, there's some powerful stuff that's at play there. And that's what we see depicted here in this moment in the cartoon. Okay, so let's keep going.
Free to be free! And then Ethan played guitar and we learned the 7 contemplations of the head by singing them. It was really fun. Praise be the head!
Praise be the... Yeah.
Hi, folks. Head priest. Thanks for farming all those potatoes at 6 p.m. So if you're a parent, you're now entitled to adoration from your children.
I'm going to start dinner.
I don't know what to say. Summer is doing really well here.
She's aced every test in potato class, and look how important potatoes have become.
She's not getting pregnant or doing drugs or missing curfew.
Please help me. You can reach me if you try. Please help me!
That's not our business as long as Summer is thriving.
That moment right there, I think, is one that is important for people who become made aware. They may be experiencing the positive aspects of a group, and then they start to notice some of the things that the group does that they don't quite agree with. And I think what the parents are struggling here is that they see such positive benefits to who their daughter has become in the face of this group that they're willing to turn a blind eye to the dark side of the group. And that is something that when you talk to people who escape from these types of really strict and rigid ideologies, they'll talk about the breaking point that they had, the thing that finally put them over the edge where they had to start to question their allegiance to the group and the claims of the group itself. But invariably, when you talk to them, they'll say, yeah, I actually did notice some things even before then, but for whatever reason, I just refused to see them, or I refused to look at what the implications of those things were if I drew them to their logical conclusions. It's a very human aspect of all of this. We see what we want to see, and particularly if the things that we find positive in a group are very, very important to us. And in this case, a parent wanting to see their child flourish, wanting to see their child experience the happiness of a found purpose and an identity that they can enjoy and grow in, those are really powerful forces. And so it's understandable that you might be willing to turn a blind eye to some of the dark side of that, but you can only do it for so long. And that's what we'll see. All right, so let's keep going. I got a message that YouTube has removed the stream. That's just because it picked up on some copyright stuff, and I just have to refute it, so it'll show up later, so don't worry about that.
Please help me! That's not our business as long as Summer is thriving.
Taco time! I hope it pleases you as the head desires.
That's wonderful, Summer.
We're so proud of you, but obviously you don't have to make dinner every night.
Of course I do, silly. Oh my god, Daddy, I'm sorry I called you silly. I'm so sorry. Heavenly Heads and Cranial Creator, forgive my transgressions against family and community. May my chores complete me as I complete them.
Jerry and Ben.
Okay, so this, I think, is one of the key moments in the show, because you can see here they're sort of enjoying what their daughter has become. They're kind of letting her know that she doesn't have to be quite as zealous, and it's okay. But then she does something. She calls her dad silly, and before adopting the ideology of the group, which has a strict and extreme reverence for parents, she would not have thought twice about that. That would have just been like a normal interaction. But by internalizing the doctrine of the group, she's also internalizing ways that she now has to judge herself. Because these groups don't, to every point that they are judging people that they're going to tie balloons to, there's a flip side of that, which is that every single person also applies that strict level of judgment to themselves. And when they see that they themselves don't meet up to the ideals of the ideology, then there is usually a doctrine of self-mortification. And it may take the form of repentance, or it may simply take the form of a constant messaging that you are not enough, that there's something inherently broken or wrong about you, and that in order for you to feel whole, you have to turn to the group. And that may be turning to the political group, turning to the religious group, turning to the God that the religious group claims to represent. But at every step of the way, it is something that diminishes and demeans your ability to feel whole and complete, which has the effect of perpetuating your dependence upon the group. And again, it doesn't have to be a religious paradigm. It can be your dependence upon the group who's generated an highest ideal, which is a utopic vision of what your nation is, or a utopic vision of what your, social justice paradigm might be, that we'll have some world in the future where there's no hatred and no bigotry. All of these things are utopian visions for the future that then become the driving force for the way that you mortify yourself or others. And we can see this here alarmingly, where a teenage girl in particular is very vulnerable to messages which might have them demean themselves. And I say this just based on when you look at research on the types of social contagion fads that tend to concentrate on teenage and young adult women. There's just some aspect about it, whether it's anorexia or cutting or any other aspects that go on, there's something that seems to target that particular population. So that's kind of being accurately reflected here. All right, so let's keep going. Boop.
Questions against family and community. May my chores complete me as I complete them.
Jerry and Beth, your family is a golden example of what Headism has to offer the world.
The world?
Headism is a hit. We're taking it worldwide, and we'd like Jerry to be our church's head of advertising.
You would?
Beth, we'd like to promote you from horse surgeon straight past human surgeon to head of medicine.
That's my dream. That's my dream.
Thank you. This is all so overwhelming, but
Absolutely not.
I'm sorry?
We've been waiting 16 years for our daughter to respect us. But the key is, it has to be our daughter, not this person she's become.
We'll take our chances, raising her without fancy new jobs, outside of a potato-based religion. And you know what? I'm sick of pretending that...
So I was watching, when I first saw this episode, I was like, it's another Rick and Morty episode. But this moment here really hit home to me. And that is where you can see throughout the episode, and again, I've edited out a lot of stuff, so you're seeing all of these sequences right one after another. But you can see where the authentic person and personality of their daughter has been replaced by somebody who is struggling to fit within this religious ideology, such that they've changed the very essence of their own personality. They've changed their demeanor, they've changed their values and priorities. It's no longer the dreams that she had based on her own interests, her own hobbies. It's what the hierarchy of values the group has provided her. Potatoes are now the most important thing. And so because she gets external praise and she fits into the value hierarchy where by maximizing her potato potential, she is achieving what is given to her as one of the greatest purposes, then she's found purpose and meaning, and that drives her to intermesh her identity as a member of this group with her own individual identity. And in doing so, she loses her individual identity. And that can be so hard when you realize that a loved one is stuck in a group like that, because if you try to directly attack the group, then they're going to feel like they're directly attacked because their identity is all blended in with that group. That's where they get purpose and meaning. And one of the really powerful parts of that miniseries on HBO Max called The Vow is that you follow along with a mother whose daughter is caught up in the group, and you can see the hand-wringing that the mom has in trying to figure out how she can reach her daughter and show her the hurtful aspects of the group so that she can get out of the group and start to live a life according to her own values, not according to the group. Because when the group mixes in their values with the individual, then what happens is the individual identity of the person, the choices that they would make that would normally shape their life, become tainted by the tendrils of the group, and you no longer get the individual, you get the individual as filtered through the group. And so this moment where the parents are even being offered high-ranking positions within the group, turn it down. And even when they acknowledge that they want their daughter to show the type of respect and to have the type of discipline and personal motivation that she's clearly showing in the group, they say, that's not how we want her to achieve those things, because we want those things to be achieved on her own terms, according to her own individual values and priorities. And that the difference there is so important, because when we grow up and we try to, we're looking for models, we're looking for patterns of people where we can see ourselves in their footsteps, or we can see somebody who's achieved something and we want to model those types of achievement, that type of greatness. It's very easy to fall into those patterns. And there's a difference between seeing somebody that you admire, learning about their life, and seeing values and traits that you want to adopt on your own terms and incorporate into your life. There's a difference between doing that and becoming saturated and completely surrounded with an ideology that imposes values on you, that tells you that it's wrong for you not to accept this value, because then you don't get a choice in those things that you get to choose to shape who you are, and you are being shaped by this external thing. And it's difficult to see that because they're pulling an inception on you the whole time. They're making you think that you're the one who's choosing it. And you can't even see that that's not the case unless you step away from the group, because they're at you 24/7. And I think it's the reason that modern culture, whether it's movies or stories, seem to focus a lot on escaping pseudo realities that are shaped by ideologies, whether it's The Matrix or Toy Story or anything else, where people have to escape, expectations and realities that are imposed on them in order to discover the real world, and in doing so, discover who they really are. It's a very relatable aspect of human existence. And to some extent, it's almost the process of growing up, because there's a type of that journey that is involved in leaving home from the influence of your parents and discovering who you are on your own terms. And the difference is, in a healthy family dynamic, your parents should be happy and encouraging of you to discover your identity on your own terms rather than imposing that on you themselves. But let's see how we resolve the story here. Okay.
That we're together because of the kids in the first place. I married you because you're the love of my life.
And I'm lucky to have you, and I never tell you that. You know, we will come out of this stronger as a family. Please don't do this. Please don't do this. Summer!
Summer, listen carefully. I stole a paperclip and I have it in my cheek, but I don't know what to do with it, and it hurts.
You're going to be okay. You will come back as babies.
I am a baby. I'm a baby now.
That moment is it's sad and it's funny at the same time. You know, we just had this really heart-touching moment where the parents are really just, they're defending their daughter. They think they are, you know, and they're saying that we want our daughter to be herself on her own terms, but it's too late. Their daughter has become so enmeshed in the ideology, in the moral framework of the group, that her daughter is now willing to turn her parents over to the annihilation and the ostracism and the what is essentially murder of the group, the depersonification of her own parents. And you can see she's doing it with a smile on her face because she believes that she's helping them, she's loving them. This is not an act of barbarism. It's not an act of any badness for her to send her parents up into the sky to be swallowed by a head. It's a loving act. And this is just another expression of that sentiment that, you know, it takes religion to take a good person and make them bad. And I think if you look at the track of human history, it's not so much that it takes religion to do that. It takes an ideology, a fundamentalist ideology, which holds itself up as the one and only true way and draws a dividing line of good and bad between those people encircled and encompassed within its ideology and those who are outside of it. And that's what we're seeing happen here. So if you want to explore the religious realm, where has this happened? You can look in Mormon history at the Mountain Meadows Massacre. You can look at the sermons and the religious rhetoric that the leaders were giving at the time, where it's better to shed a person's blood and act as a savior for them in their own atonement than it is to suffer them. And so that's the only way that the people involved in the Mountain Meadows Massacre were able to slaughter men, women, and children and believe that they were righteous in doing so, believing that they were good in doing so. That's the only way if you look at the Cultural Revolution in Maoist China, where young people were able to enforce struggle sessions and even murder of people who upheld the old ways because they didn't conform to the new cultural ideology. You know, history and mankind is rife with examples of people adopting these fundamentalist ideologies that become totalizing. And then the ground effect is that they develop what some people call a pseudo-morality. It's a morality that is built within the framework of an ideology that takes things that you would otherwise consider to be reprehensible and wrong and turns them and elevates them into good things because they support the dynamics of the ideology. And that's what we're seeing right here.
You're going to be okay. You will come back as babies.
I am a baby. I'm a baby now.
Show me what you got.
Lapu, 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 laps. Napu, 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 naps.
Headward, free now to rise.
Hey, look at the heads! Looks like the heads are getting angry.
Napu, 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 naps. Oh, tough crowd.
I'm sure that has nothing to do with this.
The heads are displeased!
Summer!
Morty!
Okay, so we missed a lot in there, but essentially Morty left off, you know, he escaped and Rick was left to himself. He couldn't really come up with a good song. And so he was performing at the same time that the parents were being sent up and the heads were booing for Rick and Morty. And the people thought, well, the heads are booing because we're doing this to these people. So then, again, there's that correlation causation error that's happening there that's kind of messing up with the religious authority of Principal Vagina. Again, I think most of these other points here are, to me, less meaningful, less impactful than what we saw in the parents seeing that their daughter had changed by having that, taking on that identity of headism. But we can finish it out here.
The heads love this! They love it when we don't kill the Smith family!
No! Stop that! You're not allowed to interpret the will of the heads!
Call off the nuclear strike. This is the president. Stop the nuclear missile launch.
Just launch.
That moment where he's like, you're not allowed to interpret the will of the heads. There's this moment in church history where other people start to think that they can receive revelations from the stone, and then Joseph Smith gets a revelation that he's the only one who gets to do that. And so you can see it's kind of a pattern for new religious movements where if they do start out with this evangelical idea that everybody can receive revelation, then it appeals to a lot of people because everybody wants to be their own religious authority. But then when you have a hierarchy of authority and structure, and it's incompatible, and so the person at the top, the originator, has to consolidate power within himself, and we see that happening right here. Again, a minor point in the whole story, I think.
To interpret the will of the heads?
Call off the nuclear strike. This is the president. Stop the nuclear missile launch.
Just launch the missiles.
Boo! Not cool.
I'm the only one that speaks to the heads.
Disqualified.
The heads disqualified. Get him.
Disqualified. Disqualified.
With all due respect, I'd like to hear what Rick and Morty have to play.
What do you say, Rick?
I say, let's do it!
All right. Here we go.
Say it with me.
Oh my God!
After 988 seasons of Planet Music, the Cromulons have decided to declare Earth the final winner and bring our musical reality show to a conclusion. Goodbye.
Okay. I think we could stop it right there. All right. So if you haven't seen that episode of Rick and Morty, I certainly invite you to go back and watch it in its totality. It's a really fun episode. It's irreverent. There's some unsavory elements to it, but it's got this surprising storyline to it, which is quite remarkable. So let's see here. I am going to set up the phone lines so that we can hear. Let me see here. We'll go ahead and have the speakers be I think that should be fine. Okay, so if you would like to chime in and share your own experience in that, you can dial 210-422-2222 and tell us what your take on it is. In the meantime, we've had a few comments. William mentions, as a TBM, that's a true believing Mormon, I would have been offended in the first minutes and turned this episode off before I could see the episode was even trying to say. That's probably true. I think if you're a really, really good Mormon, you probably don't watch Rick and Morty anyway because it has all sorts of unsavory elements to it. I was not a fan of Rick and Morty when it first came out, when my kids started sharing memes from it, but I'm a huge fan of science fiction, so I decided to give it a chance, and I really enjoyed it. Certainly, people have different opinions about it, but chances are a lot of people that are TBMs are probably not going to watch this channel anyway, but that's how it is. Okay, Gimpy Geezer says, the fact that you're using Rick and Morty in this context is magnificent. I saw this episode as a TBM, and even then, the cracks in my shelf got bigger. It's sometimes kind of fun to ask yourself the question when you see some of this stuff, what would you have thought about it if you were a TBM when it happened? And in that case, I don't really know. Okay, so let's see here. It looks like chances are you probably have to go to the Facebook video. For now, it will be restored later. Okay, somebody's back. It says back. So again, if you want to maybe share some of your thoughts on this episode or on the theme of how some of these ideological groups can change your personality in some ways for the better, but that it comes at a cost. And unfortunately, sometimes that cost is that you start to look at the world with a type of pseudo or constructed morality where you're drawing the line between who is good and who is bad at whether or not they conform to the group. And in some cases, this includes how you judge yourself or other people, and it changes who you are. And so by accepting the group, you're in some sense allowing the group to affect who you are, to alter your identity. And it takes away a certain amount of your own central autonomy to do so. Because anytime your authentic self would choose to do something other than what the group demands or expects, then there's pushback. If not pushback from the group around you, pushback in your own mind, because you've already accepted and internalized their paradigm. And that's a high price to pay to be in one of these groups. If you haven't noticed, there's probably been a thread in a lot of the videos that I've had recently where the idea of dogma and ideology being the thing to examine rather than religion, so to speak, is what I've started to frame the discussions in. There's something very specific about that. And I think that when you start to see the way that people's moral structures change, happen not just in the context of religion, and a lot of the negative things that we have identified in the context of religion, we start to find expression in other contexts in our life that don't even have a notion of God or even a central authority figure. Then I think you start to see that there's a reason that you need to start paying attention to how these things operate on the matrix of a human psychological landscape, because these same forces are at play. And when you start to see the same red flags that you would identify in religion, but it's in a different type of group, you still have to listen to those things because some of the same forces are still at play. All right, let's see here. Any other comments? Enigma asks, if you had a chance to go on Saints Unscripted, what would you talk about? I don't know. I think they're the ones that kind of control the narrative of their show, and they probably would not be open to me being on their show or talking unless they set the parameters of the discussion. And I don't know that there's any incentive for them to do that. I doubt that any of that the producers of that show would find it useful. I think they're fairly ideological in how they approach things, so they would only have a guest on that they could somehow use that session to diffuse some principle or notion that has been used against the church. So they'll have an atheist on and they'll present the atheist as good and fine, but then they'll press up against aspects that the church answers that atheism doesn't necessarily answer. So there are aspects about the church that are really good and positive in terms of the ability that the church has to form a sense of community, a sense of purpose, a map for your life that gives you stability. All those things are really things that the church does phenomenally well. You tend to gloss over the dark side of these things, just as we saw in this animated episode. So it may be that the copyright restrictions that happened on the episode kind of turned away anyone that might have desired to call in, and it's okay if there's no call-ins. We will go ahead and close things down. So until next time, this has been Talk on Things and Stuff, and we'll see you next time.